All right, today we're going to be putting some universal flares onto the Mustang here. These come in a kit of 4, so I got one for each fender. These fender flares are universal fit in 35 millimeter from eBay. So they're nice and cheap. So so as I said, it's just a universal fit, so it's not made for this car, it's not made for any car, so fitment will vary. You'll have to do some tweaking and pulling and everything to get them to fit on the car. You might even have to do some trimming of the flares or trimming of the car to get these to fit. So why did I go with these ones? Most off price. It was 40 bucks for 4 of them. You can't beat that. They do make specific ones for Mustangs, but they're much more expensive, and it's not something that I'm really trying to do on the car right now. I kind of actually do like the look of the black plastic on here. It kind of gives it a racy look, I think. And this is a race car after all. Fitment doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be functional. And the whole reason that I'm doing this is to cover the wheels once the new wheels go on. They're further out of the fender and there will be a small spacer on there, so I want to have some coverage of the wheel. I don't really want them sticking too far out from the body. It's just a personal preference of mine, and I like the look of the black fender flares on there, as I said. Another reason that people put these on is to cover up trim lines. I don't have any interference going on between the tire and the fender, so I'm not really going to trim this fender at all, or the rear ones. I'm just going to basically put some cover over the fender. In the future, if the car gets lowered more, then I can go back and trim this out and give me more clearance. But right now, that's not the issue. That's not why I'm installing these. So this fender has been rolled, which is causing some high and low spots as I run my hand across here. And it's probably been pulled a little bit from doing that fender rolling, which I'd done one time that the fender was off with just a block of wood and a hammer, so it's not smooth at all, and that will probably cause some fitment issues as we try to go around this and trying to get a nice even fit on, since this has a lot of waviness in it, and it also has some curvature going to it, where this would be easy to install if this was nice and flat, but since there's some curvature, there's going to be some bending and some heat gun action to try to get this to fit on nice and flat as possible. Another thing to look at when you're choosing the universal fender flares is the distance from the flares and the distance from here to like the center line. So I've measured the wheel well opening, and the distance in between the flare is pretty much exactly the same as my wheel well opening. They make several different sizes, so that's something that you do want to check, along with how much the flare actually comes out. And as I said, this is 35 millimeters, which is roughly about 1.5 inches. Also, as you kind of tweak it and bend it out, you can get a little bit more flare coming out there, as you can kind of see in the video. So I think my plan of attack, I'm going to mount this back one first, so I can get that placement of where I want it, because I do have a body line here that kind of bends down, and then there's another body line here that bends down, and that looks to kind of give the best fitment if I kind of put it right below the body line. If I'm too far above the body line, this body line, then these end pieces kind of just stick out and will be hard to get them to go down. So if I go just below it, and then I'll kind of work my way I think, forward and doing some twisting as I go and some heat gun action. The final attachment of this fender flare will be with Rivnuts into the body with screws holding it on, so it will be easy to take it on and off. For test fitment, I'm going to use just smaller screws in there, so it will be easy to move it if I need to. If I drill a hole in the wrong place, I can easily move and cover just a small hole, or I can enlarge the hole later on to get the Rivnut in. So let me get some pilot holes drilled in these and we'll start fitting it up. All right, I got pilot holes drilled in them. So we'll start fitting this guy up. I think I'm gonna put him, this one kind of like right here. So yeah, as I kind of bend it in, it kind of flattens it out some on this top. If I leave it kind of pushed out here, see you're too far out, but you can't really put anything on here. But as I bend this guy in, bends these ones in, which looks pretty good. I just need to kind of figure out where my best fitment is going to be and keep kind of the lines that I want. I don't want this the flare to be too far in or too far out of the wheel well. I want it to look fairly consistent as you're looking at it from the side. I'm just gonna put in maybe a second one to kind of line this up, and then I'll maybe start moving. So I don't want to just go in a line, because then once I get down here to the end, I might be off. So I think I'll get this one into where I kind of want it, and then I'll start on this end and then work my way into the middle. And another thing that I'll note is I'm just screwing straight into this right now. I didn't put any tape because I plan to sand and paint this bumper, so I'm not really worried about scratching it or anything like that. So if anybody else wants to do this, you might want to put some tape down or something like that to protect your paint if you care about your paint some. I'm just planning on sanding this and painting it, so I don't really care right now of any chips or scratches that get on this. Put in another machine screw. So it looks like this front one will be, the screw will be just above this this fender line, which is okay. I can't have it above and below, or below on both ends. So what I'll do, because there's a gap here between this, between the flare and the bumper, because the bumper kind of curves in underneath of this body line. So I'll come with the heat gun and try to bend that guy in. If that doesn't work, I can always also just cut it right there, and that will look fine for me. So yeah, I think I'll come through and maybe drill this hole, and then we'll come back. All right, got it on there. The fitment is actually pretty good. There's a little pushing in some places where I'll take the heat gun, and then once this guy gets screwed in, it'll be much tighter, but I'll take the heat gun and kind of push it in. All right. Take the heat gun, and we'll kind of go around and we'll try to kind of form this to the fender. So we want to try to spread out the heat. We don't want to concentrate in any one area. We don't want to melt the plastic. We just kind of want to get it warmed up to where we can easily kind of form it, and then we'll let it cool, and hopefully it holds that shape. Is the plan. All right, with using the heat gun, kind of got the fitment to be better. It was actually pretty good to begin with, but got it just bent in a little bit closer. There's still a little bit of gaps, but nothing too bad. Also, one thing to think about when I put in the rivnuts will be spaced off of the body just a little bit. So there will be a gap that will be in here just naturally, unless I want to put any kind of gasket material or something, rubber or something in between the flare and the body, which I'm not sure if I will, but right now it kind of pinches into the body where these screws are, but once there's the nut on there, it might be, or the rivnuts in there, there might be a little bit of gap that helps with this pinching in, or this could be even a bigger gap. I don't have to take more heat to it to try to get it to bend in, but overall it's not too bad. I'm going to leave these on here to just let this fully cool down and hopefully form better to this bumper area transition. I don't want to pull it off too soon, so we'll let that sit. But I did just get the rivnuts delivered and the screws that I plan to use. MasterCar is awesome. They usually have 1 to 2 day shipping, which is great. So I'm using an M6 Rivnut that will go in there, and I have the tool to do that. So if you haven't seen a Rivnut, so it's like doing a rivet, except for it's putting threads in there, which you then just screw in any kind of bolt. So you have to have a special tool which screws into the rivnut, and then as you tighten, just as you would do a rivet, as you tighten, it squishes this rivnut in the material. So the rivnut will then be in the fender. Then I have just some M6 button head screws. So just a button head bolt with an Allen socket that will hold these all on. They're stainless steel, so they shouldn't rust. I got them black to blend in with the fender flare. I didn't want the chrome ones distracting from the flares. The black will also blend in better for any of these that might be a little off center. So yeah, I'll let this sit and cool on here to let it get formed, and then I'll pull it off and I'll drill all the holes to the correct size for the rivnut, which I believe is M10, but I'll double check that. And then I'll be able to pull this fender off to get it sanded and painted. I wanted to get this on before doing that, so that I can get these holes all painted also, so to reduce any rusting issues that might happen before putting in the rivnuts. The paint that I'm using is probably going to be the Rust-Oleum smoke gray, just because I have a whole gallon of it. So why not use it instead of going and buying another paint? I would prefer to paint the car red to match it up with the rest of it, but I don't have red with me right now. And it doesn't really matter what color the car is painted right now, because in the future it's going to be wrapped all the same color. So whatever I paint it right now doesn't really matter in the long run. So I'm just going to paint it with what I have. All right, we got the fender back on. As you can see, it's been painted. So this is just a basic coat on there. It's nice and smooth to go on for future wrap that will go on the car. All right, so back to getting the fender flare finished up. So as I mentioned before, we'll be using Rivnuts. So this is Rivnut tool. So it's just a basic one off of Amazon that I got. So these will go in to each of the holes, and then this tool will crush them and they'll stay in the fender. So they're real easy to use. You just, after you have the correct size on there, throw that guy on all the way, put it in, and crimp. And unscrew it. And you're done. Put Rivnuts in all these holes, and then we'll test up the fender flare. Rivnuts are really useful if you need to put threads into a panel that you can't get to the backside, or a panel that you don't want to put nuts on the backside. I could have easily just riveted these fender flares on, but I wanted to be able to easily remove them if I needed to. And it just kind of looks a little bit better than having rivets on there, I think. All right, so I got the fender flare on. I still need to get the front bumper on to get it kind of finalized on the front there, but the rest of it is on. So as I said earlier, it's just a universal fit, so there are some gaps and things like that, but overall it looks good, especially from this side. You wouldn't even be able to tell. So overall, I'm happy with it. I mean, it's going to serve its purpose of just kind of covering the tire and just kind of giving it a more race car look. So I'm going to go ahead and get all the other ones fitted up, drilled, and mounted. So then we'll come back and show you guys the final installation of the fender flares and how they look. And we'll do some, maybe a little bit more up close, but we'll go around and look at all 4 of them. Soon we'll be getting the car wrapped also. It's going to make the car look good. It's going to be all one color, which will be quite nice. So see you guys back in a minute. All right, and I'm back. So I got the fender flares installed on all the corners. I got the new wheels also installed. So this was the demo corner that I did. So we'll go around and looking at all the others to see how they came out. So the rear was a little bit easier to do. This was more of a flat surface, but there's still some curvature down here and at the bumper. So I kind of like how the rear turned out. It makes the car look a little bit lower, which is nice. There's maybe about an inch between the bottom of this and the bottom of the fender there. So we'll go around to the passenger side, and there is some gaps in here. It's more noticeable on the rear than it is on the front. So I might try to get some kind of foam or something of that nature to go in between here to kind of seal it up. But from the outside, you can't really tell. It's only when you're looking down the line there that you can kind of see this gap. But as we've said, these are universal flares, so they're not supposed to have a perfect fit. But you just still want to make them try to look as good as possible. So something that I noticed while I was doing this is this tire is sticking further out of the body than the driver's side. and that's due to me lowering the car and not adjusting my panhard bar. So that's just something that I need to put on the list. I need to go back and shorten up the panhard bar to bring this axle, the center of this axle back up in the car. So that could explain some of the rubbing that I was having on the driver's side on the inside fender. So that's good to know. But fitment is looking pretty good. And then here is the passenger front. So the car is a little bit higher in the front than it is in the rear. Pretty noticeable. You can fit 3 fingers in here where the rear is a solid 2 fingers. So I do know that the front is higher, and that's just to try to keep better geometry going on the front than if the car was too low. That is something that I will be changing hopefully in the future, but for now it is what it is. Check out these wheels. These things look awesome. So I'm really digging the bronze with the red. It's a nice combo. So we'll have to see what color the car ends up, but obviously we're not going to be keeping it this two-tone going on right now. So stay tuned for that. Try to get a side profile of the car. So it's definitely going to make a good improvement on the looks. It keeps the wheels kind of tucked in the fender, which is always nice. The car doesn't drive on the street too much, so I'm not really too worried about rocks and water and all that jazz. But all right, so yeah, that's universal fender flares install on the Mustang. Turned out pretty good for them just being one size fits all. If you do plan on putting universal flares on there, there are a few different sizes, so make sure you do your measurements. So I did have to use a heat gun to try to get some of the curvature that I needed for the fitting onto the fenders. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.